Hello again, everyone, and thank you for joining us for this Monday's edition of Alaska Weather. I'm Dave Percy, meteorologist with the National Weather Service, and I'll be hosting today's show. Up first on the hazardous weather graphic, we still have wind advisories out until 10 a.m. tomorrow, Tuesday morning, for the central eastern Alaska Range, Delta Junction, those areas west of the Toe Cutoff, for gusts to continue above 50 miles per hour. And also out here in the St. Lawrence Island area, Bering Strait on up toward the northwest coast. High surf advisory remains out tonight into tomorrow for, again, those northerly winds kicking the surf up 2 to 4 feet above normal, or the heavy surf tides 2 to 4 feet above normal possibly. And that'll continue again tonight and into tomorrow. And for the fire danger chart, kind of a change shifting around low back to the west here, with all the moisture that's streamed northward there from the system off the southwest coast, but still quite an area of high fire danger. It's improved over the Yukon Flats there from the extreme they had a couple days ago. Now we've got some extreme in and around the greater Fairbanks area, and then off to the southeast there, east-southeast, especially due to the wind with Delta Junction today seeing gusts 50 miles an hour through the afternoon. And also an area here in the Copper River Basin of high to extreme fire danger along and over toward and around the Glen Allen, Gulkana areas. And moving on to satellite imagery, you can see clouds covering all of mainland Alaska, moving eastward into the Panhandle with the main frontal boundary. Low pressure both at the surface and aloft out here along the coast, right in this location, and the clouds spiraling around that with another surge of moisture right through here coming across Kodiak and up into the Kuskokwim Valley. Another surge back through here across Bristol Bay. And that whole pattern will continue, but slowly move eastward, slowly weaken over the next couple of days. Not too bad over the southern southeast coast. Actually, central areas as well, the clouds on the increase, but rain just starting to slide on into the northern areas this afternoon. We had moderate rain at Yakutat, moderate to heavy rain falling today at Cordova, and still some pretty good rainfall amounts since midnight here across areas of interior Alaska, especially southern areas. Up to the north there, just a few hundredths of an inch of rain falling in that same time period. Gusty winds also still 40-mile-an-hour wind gusts recorded at Gamble today out of the north, and Pribilofs, St. Paul, north-northwest, gusts 40 miles an hour as well. And then those diminish quite markedly as you head a little bit farther to the west there. Just low clouds, fog, drizzle, very weak system out here over the Bering Sea, half-mile visibility, for example, in fog at Shimia, and a little bit of scattered light shower conditions moving into the Adak area. Otherwise, this trough here, keeping the gradient tight enough, as I mentioned, for those brisk winds over the Pribilof Islands. Another surge of moisture, rain showers, and fog with this now swinging down toward the eastern Aleutians and Alaska Peninsula. Main low center right about this area here at the surface here over the southwest with 986 millibars central pressure. Areas of rain, fog, and drizzle. Nothing heavy extending back up towards St. Lawrence Island and the Bering Strait. And kind of a showery, damp, cloudy day across the Seward Peninsula. And little gusty winds gusting 30 miles an hour Kivalina out of the northeast there on the northwest coast, but light winds along the Arctic coast. Some showers here, thunderstorms developing over the central interior today. Right about in this area, starting to expand northward a little bit, possibly to the east and a little to the west there. And down to the south, rainfall here up to Cordova today, picked up another 1.5 inches of rain. Some areas around that area had even heavier amounts than that. St. Mary's out in the Delta, or the Deltas, had about 1/2 inch of rain today also, while Independence Mine had 1/2 inch of rain, which was a little bit more than what they saw, say, over in the Susitna Valley. It's usually one of the heavier precipitation amounts when you have southerly flow like this. And again, moderate rain into Yakutat now, and that's starting to slip on into the northern panhandle. See, for tonight, that front continues to push eastward. This northern portion here in the interior really weakens, in fact, just completely dries out. Not expecting any precipitation with this. Clouds breaking up, look for some clearing behind that boundary. Showers, eastern north slope into the Brooks Range, scattered areas of precipitation back to the Bering Strait, western Seward Peninsula. Stays breezy here from the Chukchi Sea through the Bering Strait, St. Lawrence Island. Winds start to diminish over the Pribilofs, will diminish tonight for the Pribilofs. West-northwest winds turn westerly, showers, low clouds, fog at times blowing into the Bristol Bay area. This trough here brings a surge of moisture. Again, southern Kuskokwim Valley into the Alaska Range down across northeast Bristol Bay. Kind of a break there for Kodiak as this pulls off to the east a little bit, but stays wet from the North Gulf Coast with continued south to north flow. Weak high pressure trying to develop there over the southern and southwest Bering Sea. And this really pretty washed out, just good for some probably IFR, fog, and drizzle, and that's about it as far as that system goes. Winds will be light over the central western Aleutians. And then for tomorrow, that front really dissipates, just dash it in as a trough, enough moisture to bring showers into the southern panhandle, periods of light rain or rain up to the north. Stays basically wet along the North Gulf Coast, but rainfall amounts will be lighter than what was seen today. Chance of thunderstorms, possibly, Susitna Valley here into the Kuskokwim, of course, along the western Alaska Range. Look for some thunderstorms embedded in the moisture out here over the Yukon-Kuskokwim Delta, and a risk of a thunderstorm up there around, looks like the Selawik and Noratak Valley areas. Winds diminishing, but they stay north, but down probably 10 to 20 now, 20, maybe gust 25 early in the day, but trending down here on those northerly winds. Turn northwest, another trough here, kick the showers up and moisture along the southwest coast, and just clipping the Pribilofs. And a little bit, again, weak high pressure here, keeping the winds light, low clouds and fog pretty widespread out over the Bering Sea. Maybe a little moisture with this, very weak trough there over the western Aleutians. Otherwise, chance of showers, rain, fog, or drizzle for the Arctic coast, but showers in over the eastern Brooks Range. And then the outlook for Wednesday, shaping up like this, low pressure up over the northeast interior. That'll help trigger some showers and isolated scattered thunderstorms up in this area. Also a risk of some thunderstorm activity, Copper River Basin, maybe the Talkeetnas back out toward the Nulato Hills, as well as looks like the Selawik Valley. Partly sunny skies in between systems, the one approaching the coast brings a chance of rain in toward the coast, Nunivak Island, light rain. Late in the day with that warm front, weak cold front extending back, brings a chance of rain to Shimia. Otherwise, look for southerly breezes about 15, maybe 20 miles an hour for the Aleutians into the Fox Islands with fog, low clouds, and drizzle, and scattered showers, a lot less scattered now over the central and southern panhandle. Still a risk up to the north. Looking at the low temperatures for tonight for the southeast coastal areas, lower to mid 50s again. Mostly in the upper 40s for the North Gulf Coast, Copper River Basin, into the eastern interior, Tok on up to Eagle, lows in the upper 40s, lower 50s, Yukon Flats, right around 50 there for the Fairbanks area, cooling into the upper 40s out toward Tanana and Galena, and upper 40s into the Kuskokwim Valley areas with upper 40s all the way out to the southwest coast. A shade below 40 there at St. Lawrence Island, both Savunga and Gamble. Lower 30s along the Arctic coast, mid 30s over the north slope, into the lower 40s for the Brooks Range, lower 40s for the Aleutians. Highs tomorrow, 65 to 70, 72 here over the northeast interior down in toward the Tanana Valley, central Tanana Valley areas. Mid 60s over toward the eastern border. And then 50s to lower 60s, south central Alaska, Copper River Basin. Mostly in the 60s here for the Panhandle, lower to mid. Lower 50s there for the southeast coast. And looks like highs lower 50s, Alaska Peninsula will have highs in the lower 50s as well as Adak and Attica, but upper 40s for the Pribilofs and mid 40s for St. Lawrence Island. Highs tomorrow, lows tomorrow, or for the next morning, Wednesday morning lows. Lower to mid 30s there along the Arctic coast with lower 50s up over the Yukon Flats and otherwise upper 40s all the way back to mid 40s along the coast and 40s out over the Aleutians and Bering Sea. Copper River Basin looks like mostly in the mid 40s, 40s to lower 50s south central Alaska. And for the Panhandle highs, upper 50s to lower 60s for Wednesday afternoon. A little cooler now, not even pushing 70, although some areas up here, it could hit 71. Otherwise 50s to lower 60s south central Alaska, 40s over the Bering Sea.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
Significant weather chart showing fair amount of IFR here across the southeast coast, up along the North Gulf Coast into the Wrangell Mountains of the Kenai Peninsula. Another band here along the central western Alaska Range on out to Togiak Bay. Also northeast Bristol Band along the Aleutian Range and Alaska Peninsula. IFR all along the Arctic coast and down to the Bering Strait area. And more IFR out here over the southwest Bering and Aleutians, moving well east of Atka. And by the afternoon, that continues eastward advance here, almost making it to Nikolsky. And marginal VFR all the way up to the southwest coast, actually well inland across the Yukon-Kuskokwim Delta, all of Bristol Bay, all of southern Alaska, IFR along the western Alaska Range, and also IFR continues North Gulf Coast into the Wrangell Mountains. VFR in the interior, marginal VFR for the Brooks Range with areas of IFR, and IFR right along the Arctic coast. IFR holds here over the Panhandle. And for the outlook for Wednesday morning, still a lot of IFR here over the southeast coast, North Gulf Coast, Wrangell Mountains, and a little more widespread now over the Kenai Peninsula up through the Chugach, maybe over to the Chugach Range. The Talkeetna is on up to the Alaska Range, definitely IFR here, western Alaska Range. Some more Kuskokwim Mountains to the Auckland Mountains, otherwise marginal VFR up to St. Lawrence Island. A lot of IFR up there, eastern North Slope to the Brooks Range and the Arctic coast, and massive IFR here at central and western Bering Sea, and just about all the Aleutians. That pretty much holds through Wednesday afternoon out here in the west with marginal VFR up to St. Lawrence Island through the Bering Strait, well inland here, again across the Kuskokwim Valley to the Alaska Range, marginal VFR, and then IFR North Gulf Coast. Retreating there over the Panhandle, looks like the eastern northern areas will see the IFR diminishing through the day, marginal elsewhere, marginal VFR for the Brooks Range. And for Anaktuvuk, IFR, Anigan though, marginal VFR. For Lake Clark and Merrill, another IFR day coming up for those two passes. Rainy IFR promises some gradual improvement to marginal VFR at sometime tomorrow afternoon. And for windy, go marginal VFRs and well, actually either entrance at times. And Isabel marginal. Mentasta though, VFR. There'll be some clouds and some showers, but of the VFR variety. Tanita, marginal VFR, occasionally at times, possibly. And for Portage, more likely marginal VFR. And for Chilcoot White, an easy one, IFR. For the freezing levels, roughly about 3,000 to 4,000 feet here. Prince William Sound back out toward Bristol Bay and the southwest coast. Otherwise, 4 to as high as 6,000 feet here up over the northern interior, 6,000 to 8,000 across the Panhandle. And a little bit more of a gradient out here from the east central Aleutians back up across the west central Bering Sea, running 2,000 feet, which is all the way south of the Alaska Peninsula now to 10,000 feet there over the far western Bering Sea and Aleutians. Icing, got some areas of considerable rime icing possible here from the northern Panhandle, terrain enhancement there. That's where the heaviest icing threat will be tomorrow, and then it kind of diminishes back to the west. And then some spotty areas here along a band of moisture extending from the Yukon Delta coast on up to the eastern Brooks Range. And for the jet stream, pretty good upper level low, especially for July here, slowly weakening and moving slowly eastward and across the southwest. That's going to hold the jet streams well to the south. Got northwest or west northwesterly, 60 knots over the western Bering. Still got southwest at about 80 knots, 80 to 90 knots into the northern Panhandle. And for 9,000 feet, pretty good breeze at this elevation there across the southeast coast, 25 to 45 knots. 25 knots North Gulf Coast, 5 to 10 over the north central interior, and pretty light for the Arctic coast, 15 to 20, and that's about it coming around the backside of this low. 25 across the Alaska Peninsula. Light winds in the Aleutians to 3,000 feet. Light winds over all of the interior here, maybe 15 to as high as 20 knots there. Western Alaska Range, light for the Arctic coast, southwest 25, Alaska Peninsula. 25 knots in across the Panhandle. Moving on to turbulence, be bumpiest here across the southeast coast. Widespread light to isolate or widespread moderate chop there, especially for small aircraft from Dixon Entrance right on up to Lynn Canal Glacier Bay. Also here over the mountains of the southeast interior areas. Lighter for Bristol Bay, maybe a little bumpy for St. Lawrence Island, the Bering Strait coast. And after the break, I'll be back with a look at the marine forecasts.
Welcome back to another edition of Alaska Weather Facts. I'm meteorologist Dave Snider, and joining me once again is Eric Stevens from GINA, the Geographic Information Network of Alaska, based up at the University of Alaska Fairbanks. Eric, welcome back to the program.
Hey, I'm glad to be here.
And once again, you brought some wonderful satellite pictures to show us and do a little show and tell about. It's just amazing. I can get lost in satellite pictures all day. What did you bring today?
Right. Well, weather satellites, what are they good for? Yeah. Of course, there's the pretty pictures that they bring us. You know, we've got a picture here from April of 2012. Okay. The Sumi NPP satellite, it's what they call a polar orbiter, which means it covers Alaska because we're near the pole. Beautiful image. You can see a storm off of southeast Alaska, the sea ice along the Bering Sea up into the Arctic. A really nice picture, and this is important because it allows a forecaster to see where the storms are, where the ice is, where the clear areas are. You need to know where the weather is now if you're going to forecast it into the future. Exactly. So satellites give us these good pictures. This is called surveillance of the weather. And you know, that same satellite also has another picture from a little more recently, August of 2014, Tropical Storm Iselle bearing down on the Hawaiian Islands. Hawaii doesn't get hit by a whole lot of tropical storms or hurricanes. Sometimes it does. And here's a picture from the same satellite, the Sumi NPP Polar Orbiter. It shows Tropical Storm Iselle approaching the Hawaiian Islands from the southeast. You can see the storm swirling away there, and then there's the Hawaiian Islands. This is a tropical storm, not quite as strong as a hurricane because we don't see the eye wall in there. This is still a serious weather system. And all of this information comes just from that satellite picture. It's so much information, and it's wonderful to look at. You see the beauty and the awe of nature right there depicted in that weather satellite. We call it a polar orbiter because the satellite flies high over the globe. Maybe we could look here at we happen to bring the planet Earth with us. This is our satellite. A polar orbit flies really close to the Earth, maybe 800 kilometers over the Earth, and goes up over the pole and then back down, and then the Earth spins under the satellite as it goes by. That's in contrast to the geostationary birds, which are much further out. And they don't view Alaska quite as well. So we love those polar orbiter satellites here in Alaska.
So when we're a lot closer, we get much better details and imagery and an idea of a better maybe position of what's going on when it's passing right over Alaska or right over Hawaii.
Yes, exactly right. The polar orbiter gives such a good view of places like Alaska. And because it's close to the planet, there's another aspect of satellites in the polar orbit that is helpful for weather forecasting. It's an aspect that's maybe not as immediately obvious as the pretty pictures that we see. And that is the capacity for the satellite to produce what's called a sounding. That is finding the vertical profile of temperature and moisture in the atmosphere. We've all heard of weather balloons. Weather balloons are launched here in Alaska twice a day at a number of airports, everywhere from Barrow to St. Paul Island to Kodiak, Anchorage and Fairbanks, Yakutat, a number of places. Launch these balloons, and we've got a picture of a balloon being launched at an airport, and the balloon goes up. It's pulling a little package, an instrument package with it that reports temperature, pressure, humidity data back, and we use that information to help feed what are called numerical weather prediction models.
The models.
The models, right. It's a mouthful, so we just call it the models. And these computer simulations, these models are computer programs that simulate the motion of the atmosphere. Well, how does a model know what the future will be like? You have to tell the model what things are like now. And you give it all kinds of information, including information from these satellite sounders. Very important. Just how important are they? We have a recent, comparatively recent study that really brings home, and this is Superstorm Sandy. We have a track image here of the track of Hurricane Sandy. It was down in the Caribbean around Cuba, and then it moved north over the ocean, offshore of the eastern seaboard, and then at the last minute, Sandy made what's called the left hook. It turned hard to the left and slammed into New Jersey. Was a major problem for the mid-Atlantic states, a calamity. It fused with another weather system and became known, this is not an official title, but Superstorm Sandy. It was quite the weather event. Well, the modelers, after the event, there's a group of modelers in Europe. They have a very good model, a frustratingly good model if you're the Americans trying to pursue their excellence. They reran their model afterwards in what's called a data denial study, where they kept everything the same. So this is 6 months after Sandy, but they went back, they reran the same model, they fed the model the same initial conditions, that is telling the model, okay, here's where we think Sandy is, down near Cuba in the Caribbean. Everything was the same as it was in the real forecast, except they didn't let the model know.
No satellite data.
No satellite data.
Okay.
So we're going to put that over here. No
Yeah.
satellite data for you. The resulting forecast 5 days out,
Yeah.
back when the real Sandy was happening and the model had the satellite data, the forecast was pretty good. We've got a graphic here on the left side. We show the forecast of where Sandy would be, and that's the red bullseye on the left. It's just south of where it actually wound up hitting. Not a bad forecast from this computer simulation, 120 hours out. On the right, you see the same model, but it didn't have the satellite data to help it understand things. And the storm is way offshore. It misses. The forecast is more accurate when the model has the satellite data. So that's the idea today we want to convey is weather satellites. They're important because they show us the pictures of where storms are. We see good examples of this. Yeah, the surveillance right now, it's great to look at those pictures. And in addition, behind the scenes, maybe not immediately obvious, but the models have to have that satellite data for them to be good forecasts. And then a meteorologist uses that information to help everyone with the forecast of where the storms will be in the future.
That is fascinating information that we can look at, see where things have been, because you can't know where you're going if you don't know where you've been. That's that old adage there. But seeing that satellites are actually helping us move forward in the weather information system is pretty amazing stuff.
You bet.
And if you want to check out Eric's satellite images that he's been talking about, whether that's something from today or last week or even much further back in Alaska history, you can easily do that yourself. Go to www.gina.alaska.edu and you can find those images there. Eric, thanks so much for joining us once again. And again, we will join you hopefully again soon for another edition of Alaska Weather Facts, where you'll tell us more really cool information about the satellites over our heads in Alaska. Thanks for joining us tonight, and we'll see you next time.
And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Welcome back with this Monday's sea ice analysis showing about the same as what we saw yesterday. The southward advances really slowed. And over the next, or in a few days, about the Wednesday, Thursday time frame, southerly winds will begin to push this back to the north. So moving on to the coastal water forecast. Small craft advisories all along the southeast coast here for 25-knot winds from the south and seas running 8 to 9 feet. Small craft advisories also in the forecast for Clarence Strait for southerlies at 25, south 25 Stevens Passage, gusts 40 knots there, and south 30 knots for northern Lynn Canal, 6-foot seas. Outlook for Wednesday, those come down to 20 knots, still out of the south. South winds light now over the Stevens Passage, Clarence Strait area. And westerlies down to 15 here along the coast, seas at about 7 feet. Southwest 15 with 8-foot seas on the north coast. And going to Cook Inlet, north of the Forelands, northeast at 15. South of the Forelands, south at 15. Southwest 15, Kamishak Bay. Southerlies 20 knots here. Barren Islands and the North Gulf Coast with seas running 8 feet. Prince William Sound, not too bad, southeast 15, 3-foot seas. That holds into Wednesday, southeast of 15 there for Prince William Sound, southwest 15, pretty light here for the North Gulf Coast to the Barren Islands as well as Kamishak Bay. Southern Cook Inlet, south at 20. Otherwise, northern Cook Inlet will see southerlies at about 15 with 4-foot seas. Small craft advisories, Shelikof Strait, Kodiak Island tomorrow, southwest 25. Sitkinak to all of the Alaska Peninsula and Bristol Bay, westerlies 25 knots, seas 8 to 11 feet. And then for Wednesday, southwest 15 for the Alaska Peninsula and west 15 up there in Bristol Bay, so lighter winds in these areas. Southwest 15 all the way up to Sitkinak, and then about 20 knots here for Kodiak Island and Shelikof Strait with 5 to 7-foot seas. Out over the western Aleutians, look for a west-southwest breeze tomorrow at about 15. 10 to 15 knot southwest winds, pretty light for the Adak-Atka area. Over to toward Nikolsky on Alaska Island, a little bit higher with west winds expected at 20 knots with seas 7 to 9 feet. And then for Wednesday, southerlies here for the eastern Aleutians, 10 to 15 knots with seas at about 4 to 5 feet. And then 15 to 20 knot south winds continue for Adak and Atka, and 15 to 20 knot winds for the western zones. For the southwest coast, north of Nunivak Island, northwest 25. Small craft advisory south of Nunivak Island as well, but winds will be westerly at 25. Fall back to 20 knots over the Pribilofs. Small craft advisories, St. Matthew Island, all the northern Bering Sea, and St. Lawrence Island, north 30 knots, but Norton Sound variable to east at 10 knots. And then those come down to 15 here for St. Lawrence Island, still out of the north, but no southerlies now into the Bering Sea. Pribilofs up to St. Matthew Island, 20 to as high as 25 knots, with seas up to 7 feet. Southwest 15 along the coast. And up along the eastern Beaufort Sea coast, east to northeast at about 15, becoming really light here on the central coast. And then back to northeast, picking up to 15 knots. And from Cape Beaufort all the way down to the Bering Strait, those northerlies will be at the small craft advisory, running 25 to 30 knots. And then for Wednesday, they come down to 20 knots there from the strait up to Cape Beaufort, northeast 15, and then light westerlies there in the central coast, light winds on the east side as well from the north and northwest, down to 10 knots. And for tonight, this front moves inland here, really weakens, dries out completely. Some clearing behind the boundary, really just a cloud producer at this point up north of the Alaska Range. Still moisture along the Alaska Range and southward to the coast here due to southerly flow continuing this front edging eastward, taking the heavier precipitation or continuing in the Yakutat area, gradually increasing there along the coast, maybe starting to rain at Sitka toward morning, staying dry down in the south. And breezy, showery, unsettled here over the eastern Bering Sea, low clouds and fog for the remainder of the Bering Sea and the Aleutians. For tomorrow, that low drifts up toward, say, Unalakleet, so showers, isolated thunderstorms, mostly cloudy skies with that, and this trough former front keeps it damp along the North Gulf Coast into the Panhandle, chance of showers even in the southern areas. And the outlook for Wednesday, the next system, warm front with the next system brings a chance of rain to, say, Nunivak Island late in the day. Otherwise, it'll be partly sunny here from Yukon Delta into Bristol Bay. Showers, isolated thunderstorms over the interior, and less in the way of shower activity for the Panhandle. Let's look at the weather. Thanks so much for joining us.
These forecasts are for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating.